Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'm gonna show you my round 2 game from the Dubrovnik Advent Open. I faced a Grandmaster on a live board, and it was funny because I was playing on board 4, and in front of my board, I was on the first row of tables, was a big screen with all the games, so I could see my game, which was fun. I only got that once when I was playing David Alberto, the Italian Grandmaster in Barcelona in round 1, and I managed to draw that game with black. In any case, I had no idea what my opponent was going to play because the game was played at 8 o'clock and the pairings got out at 15 minutes to 8. So, no prep. My opponent played knight f3, I went d5, and we very quickly got into a semi-Slav. So he played e3, knight f6. Now here, I think the most annoying move for black to face is b3, transposing into a reti, where the bishop after knight c3, e6. Here the most annoying move is b3, transposing into a reti in which black cannot play bishop f5 or bishop g4. But my opponent played d4, and this is now a normal semi-Slav. He in fact played one of the main lines, the Meran semi-Slav, bishop d3. And this is a forced line. I played all of this at tempo because I've played it a million times. Takes, b5. The bishop has 3 squares. I think bishop e2 is the most critical line, but bishop d3, what he played, is the main line. And now a6, black is preparing c5, which is an absolutely essential pawn break because the bishop wants to come out to b7. And white can play e4, which is the best move. I would say there are no optimal alternatives, although people have castled against me and played other stuff. But my opponent is a Grandmaster, he plays the best move, e4. Okay, c5 absolutely forced. You have to free up your bishop. And now there are 2 moves. The old main line, which is e5, and this is how the line goes. White should castle now, bishop b5 loses the bishop, knight d4 loses a lot of time to queen b6. So white castles, black goes queen b6, and the game goes on. But my opponent played d5, which is the Reynolds Attack, and I think this is sharper. The last time I played this in a tournament game was actually in 2021 against Samaluo Tapani, and Tapani is actually Stepan in Finnish, or Tapani, I don't know how to pronounce it, and I lost the game. My opponent was 24-50, something like that. So I don't have a good score with this. In any case, I go c4, and white's main source of compensation is d6, where I probably have to recapture fe6. There are some lines with taking the bishop, but fe6, and then bishop c2. We transpose to this because my opponent played bishop c2 first. Okay, I played queen c7. This is still theory. Takes, all fine. I had more than an hour on the clock at this point because I just knew everything. And now white can play knight g5 or knight d4. Those are the 2 critical moves. And against both, black plays knight c5, covering the e-pawn with the knight and with the bishop. But my opponent castled. And I knew that this was a move. I knew that black had several moves. I should say, before I go on, I have not engine checked the game. You could have seen it live yesterday. Excuse me. I don't know if they have evaluation bars on the live stream. I think they don't, because otherwise I'd be able to see them during the game. So you guys can engine check this on your own. If you want a PGN, you can find it on the tournament link below. Just go to round 2 and you can get the PGN. So I knew that there were a couple of moves here. I knew that there was a line. So one of white's main threats is e5. If e5 happens and it works, then I would say black is losing because you don't really have a move. So there's a line with bishop c5, which e5 becomes scary. White goes queen e2, and now you probably have to either play e5, which is absurd because of knight d5 or knight h4, knight f5, or you have to play knight e5. And this is as far as I could remember. I had no idea what happens if, for example, knight e5, queen e5, f4 at some point, king h1, f4. So I was afraid of this. Another line I remembered was bishop b7, against which white probably plays knight d4 and I go knight c5. This seemed okay, but now there could be f4 e5 or rook e1 e5 or queen e1 e5 and so on and so on. So I played another line. I don't know, I haven't checked the book. I don't know what the most popular move here is. I'm gonna figure that out after I finish analyzing the game properly. And again, another digression, I had decided to show you the games during the tournament now, but I cannot do proper analysis, and without proper analysis, I will not be using the engine or the live book to see where I had gone wrong. So in any case, I played bishop d6, and I know that this is a move. The idea behind it is to sometimes prevent the knight from moving away because h2 is hanging with check, but more importantly to play against e5. And my opponent played knight g5. Now, I had spent a long time thinking here, not because I wanted to take on h2, that's, you cannot take on h2. If you do, then king h1, and if I try to save my pawn now, let's say knight c5, then f4, and I just lose my bishop. Because on bishop g3 there is, I don't know, rook f3 and stuff like that. So yeah, I didn't want to take the pawn. I was debating between a couple of options, knight b6 and knight c5. Now, why would I want to play knight b6? Well, knight c5 is the natural move, and I saw a lot of problems with this move. I ended up playing it anyway. But on knight b6, I couldn't really figure out what to do after e5, bishop e5, rook e1. And now that I see it on the board, it seems completely fine. I can just castle or even take on h2. So I don't know why this was a problem for me. Another move is knight e4. And I was also afraid of this. This also seems uncomfortable. I cannot really take because g3 will shut in my bishop. And I'm not sure I want my opponent to exchange on f6 because, as you can see in this line, the bishop is on c2, the bishop is on c1, the queen is coming to h5, so seems kind of risky. So I played knight c5, knowing that the following line is going to happen. Obviously, f4, e5 is the threat, so my opponent plays f4. In my mind, I had to play e5. One alternative was h6, but I didn't really like that because my opponent takes the bishop, and so for example h6, knight f3, and e5 again. Now we trade everything. There's bishop f4. Seems much worse for me than the game continuation. Not that the game continuation seemed pleasant. So I played e5, giving away the d5 square. And the problem here is that the rook is coming in after fe. The bishops are alive, the queen is coming in, my king is stuck in the center because the bishop hasn't moved yet. If I could castle queenside, then great. Knight d5 is also a tempo on the queen, and I have to take the knight. If I try moving my queen away, in some lines, let's say I go, I don't know, queen b7, then maybe I just lose my bishop. Maybe queen d6 wins the bishop because my bishop's hanging. If I go, for example, queen d8, still keeping an eye on the bishop, then knight takes, queen takes, and obviously I'm busted here. I'm just losing the bishop. Or if knight takes, pawn takes, I'm guessing this is even worse because the lines just keep opening up. So on knight d5 I had to take. And believe it or not, if my opponent had taken on e5, I was about to resign. fe5 I couldn't see a response to. And when I was first analyzing bishop d6 and knight c5, I had concluded that fe is fine. So on move 14, when I was planning to play knight c5, my idea was, okay, if fe, then I play bishop e5, and after e d5 I can take on h2. But I cannot take on h2. I'm just losing. Because after king h1, what do I do now? I couldn't find a single sensible move. Because rook f7 is coming. Everything's coming. Rook e1 is coming. I don't know. After rook e1, I should probably resign. I don't know. Let's say bishop e5, rook e1 still. I'm going to lose the bishop. So yeah, very, very, very ugly position. So after knight d5, luckily for me, my opponent didn't take on e5. I should say that queen takes d5 is bad. This I did see because it just go queen b7, and I don't know, whatever happens, I'm just gonna castle. If queen e6, I can challenge the queen. If queen f7, I can trade and trade this bishop for the knight. So this I don't think would have worked. But my opponent took with the pawn very quickly. And I had foreseen this as well. And I had decided to play the move e4, which is a temporary pawn sacrifice. And whichever way my opponent takes, my pieces suddenly come to life and my king is relatively safe. And I was really happy with my position now. Once again, I should say that after knight d5, I would have resigned on fe5. Because I honestly don't think there's a defense. But after ed, e4, all of white's pieces seem to be blocked. And this pawn is hanging as soon as I castle. This pawn isn't strong either. My bishop is controlling the outpost on e6, so there's no clear way forward for white. And if I manage to develop and play something like rook a8 or even rook c8, then my queenside pawn majority, which is the point behind the Reynolds attack for black, starts moving forward. And at this point, my opponent must have spent half an hour. Remember, it's a 60-minute game. And after he'd made his next move, he had 12 minutes on the clock. I still had 45. So I was, okay, I mean, I'm playing a Grandmaster and I'm hoping, okay, this move really is good. My position really is good. He doesn't know what to do immediately, at least, anymore. So my opponent took with the knight. I trade, of course, so I can gain a tempo on castling. Takes, bishop takes, and castles. And this seems like a really good position. I don't know whether white has any advantage at all. I don't think so. So my opponent played king h1, which sets up a trap. I cannot win the f-pawn because just d6 is coming either after the bishop trade or before the bishop trade. Doesn't matter. I'm just going to lose a piece. So I cannot take on f4. So I need to start developing. And in this position, I lost the game in a single move. I'm going to try to explain why and how. So here's my issue. I knew that I could play bishop f5, which I think may be the best move. But I didn't want to trade pieces. And in particular, I didn't want to trade the bishop that was controlling e6. I was afraid of rook e1, rook e6. However, after putting this on the board, let's say bishop e4, rook e4, rook a8, rook e6, I don't really see an issue with this. I'm just going to win this pawn. What happens if I go rook f6? I don't think my opponent can defend. I'll just win the pawn. And now my queenside pawn majority is extremely strong. And maybe black is even much better now. Again, I don't know. You're going to have to use the engine. So bishop f5, I think, is an extremely good move. During the game, as I said, I was worried about the e6 square, but I still have two rooks. f4 is still weak. And this bishop is the best attacking piece white has. h7 is the only problem square. So I want to set up a threat of taking on f4. To do that, I need to connect my rooks and move my a8 rook out of the way, probably to e8. So I don't have another square for the bishop. I don't want my bishop on b7. That seems very bad. It's just staring at the pawn. So I started looking at bishop d7. And on bishop d7, if queen h5 works, then I'm losing. If it doesn't work, then I think I'm better. I think this is better than bishop f5 if queen h5 doesn't work. So here was my calculation. Queen h5. I don't have h6 because of queen g6 and I lose my rook on a8. So, for example, queen h5, h6, queen g6, rook f6, queen h7 check, king f7, queen... I don't know. Wait. I'm not even sure now. Here, here, here. Oh yeah, okay, I can do this. And now if the rook steps back to the back rank, then I pick up the rook in the corner, or if here, then I can just take. And it's the same thing. But the critical line, of course, is g6. And here was my calculation. Bishop takes, h takes, queen takes, king h8. My opponent doesn't have rook f3, because I have bishop f5 and I'm covering the h3 square with the bishop. So there are no mating threats with the rook. So the mating threats are going to come from the bishop. So my opponent either plays b3 or plays bishop to e3 or plays bishop to c2, bishop to d2. On bishop d2, I can play b4, preventing bishop c3, but then bishop e3 is again possible. So probably the main threat, and on b3 I can go c3, and it's the same thing, the bishop should shuffle to e3 and come to d4. So the main threat is bishop e3, bishop d4, checkmate. My calculation was bishop g6, hg6, queen g6, king h8, bishop e3, bishop c5. And, and I started looking at d6, queen takes d6, and I couldn't see a good follow-up, which is absurd, because my opponent's queen is on g6, and my opponent has the simple queen h5 check, just winning the bishop on c5, and I'd missed queen h5. So the game actually went bishop g6, and after bishop g6 I took a couple of minutes, I saw queen h5, and yeah, I was hoping for a blunder, not that it was going to happen, but if I take the bishop, I'm losing by force. If I don't take the bishop, I have to play bishop e8, and I'm losing by force. So I just took the bishop. Queen takes here, bishop e3, bishop c5, and on d6 I resigned because it's pointless. Of course, if I play bishop takes d6, then bishop d4 is trouble. It just doesn't work. And if queen d6, then queen h5 is game over. Another variation I started looking at after queen takes g6, bishop e3, king h8, bishop e3 is what if I go bishop f5 and just give up a piece, but it doesn't work. Yeah, I'm just losing. After the game, my opponent said, positionally you stand really well. If you play anything else other than bishop d7, he said, you play g6, play anything, and you're better. That's what my GM opponent told me. Yeah, it's easy to think about stuff after the game. I did see queen h5, I did see bishop takes g6, I just didn't see queen h5 afterwards, which is very poor vision, but okay. Had I been afraid, I would have played bishop f5, but I actually was thinking positionally, wanted to cover the e6 square, delay the exchange of bishops, because the thing is, on bishop f5, my opponent doesn't really have a good retreat square, because if the bishop comes somewhere over here, then I can take and just take the f4 pawn. If the bishop comes here, then my bishop sits on d3, and I win the f4 pawn. So yeah, in round 3, I'm playing a 1700 rated opponent. This is a tough tournament. It's a double round every day. Yesterday's round was at 8 p.m. I don't think I've ever played chess at 8 o'clock at night in my life, a tournament game. So I was really tired. Today the rounds are at 1 and 5, and then tomorrow same thing. I'm not playing on a live board at 1 o'clock today, so you won't be able to follow the game, but if I win, maybe I will play on a live board. The first 20 boards are live boards. Don't spoil the analysis for me, please. I haven't used the engine to engine check the game, so if you have some comments, do human comments, don't give me engine evaluations. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for more chess, and cross your fingers for round 3. Bye bye.